Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be this month's installment of Would I Repurchase? So that is a series I do here on my channel where I randomize 10 palettes from my collection and then talk about whether I would or would not repurchase them. It's a pretty straightforward series. So if that sounds good to you, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would love it if you stuck around, but with all that, let's just get started. All right, I've been doing this series on my channel for quite some time now. I feel like you probably know what it's all about. There's other creators that do this series, but the way that I like to do it is if these palettes disappeared overnight. Some people like to do it where if the palette was a new launch, would they still be interested in the palette? I like to approach it like I have the palette, I know the formula, I know how much I reach for the palette, and if it just disappeared, it was gone, would I go out of my way to repurchase that palette? So I am going to screen record my Tiny Decisions app, and we are just going to get started pulling some palettes and seeing which ones I'm going to talk about today. So let me make sure I turn my screen record on. I think this is my last episode with this wheel before I have to stop procrastinating and update it. But let's just get started here. The first one is going to be Lethal Midnight Serenade. Number 2 is Unearthly Spring Magic. Chanel Mediterranean. Number 4, Pat McGrath Divine Rose. Number 5, Desert Lights from Flower Beauty. Ensley Rainland of Enchantment. Number 7, I think, is Odens Eye Spring Dragon. 3 more. Natasha Denona My Mini Dream. Number 9 is Unearthly Dreamer. And the last one, Bella Beaute Bar Basic Witch. All right, I am gonna go pull those palettes and then we'll talk about them. I have all my palettes here, so let's just get started talking about the first one that was pulled, which is the Lethal Cosmetics Midnight Serenade. Here is what this palette looks like. I 100% would repurchase this palette over and over again. Lethal was one of the first indie brands that I tried. While this isn't my favorite Lethal palette, I do really love Lethal as a brand. I know not everyone loves their formula, which is fine. We're all different, but I really, really do. It is a little bit like redundant right here, but I would miss this palette if I didn't have it in my collection. So it can stay and I would repurchase it. I think the shimmers are really pretty and it's a little bit like dark, but it has a place in my collection and I knew instantly that I would repurchase this one if it was to disappear. Now the next one we have is maybe, also a favorite indie brand of mine, Unearthly. We have 2 palettes to talk about, but this is the Spring Magic palette. I was so excited when I saw this color story here. Now I will say I like maybe like 2/3 of the palette. Not a huge fan of this blue row. Mostly the teals. It's like these 2 mattes that I don't love. If we're gonna like really get down with it, because I don't mind this iridescent shade. This is like a blurple blue, kind of like twists into both. And then this also is a duochrome, kind of like blue to green. So I can deal with those. Yeah, it's really only those 2 shades. I love this palette a lot. I don't love Unearthly going into these, what are these, 18 pan palettes, I think. I wish they would have stuck with their 10 pans. For me, that's a little bit of a better size, but still, like, Unearthly's formula is so, so good. Their mattes, their shimmers, everything. I love that you can do something more neutral, something more peachy. you just have a lot of variety and it's so springtime. I really need to pull this one out and prioritize it now that we're kind of in spring before it just gets too late and I don't want to as much as some other palettes like Midnight Serenade. But yeah, I would repurchase this one. I love all of my Unearthly palettes a lot. So this one is going to go in the yes pile. My Chanel quad in Mediterranean. This might have been my first Chanel quad that I purchased, I think. And it was one of the very first videos that I did on my channel. I remember specifically that I tried the Chanel, the #1 de Chanel, the Revitaliscence foundation. That was like one of my very first videos, and I tried this palette at the same time. This is a really pretty palette, but I'm not a fan of all shimmer palettes. I just find that I don't use them as much as I would like to because it's not an all-in-one palette. Yes, I could use these as one and done shades and they're stunning. Like each of these, there are really, really beautiful shadows. I actually very much like having this palette in my collection. The shimmers are something special. They really, really are, but I just don't think I'd repurchase it because it's an all shimmer satin palette. I wouldn't, because I wouldn't get the use out of it for the price. If it was less expensive, like maybe I would, but yeah, I'm gonna have to say no to this little quad here. Then we get into Pat McGrath, the infamous Divine Rose. What Pat McGrath just cannot let go of. The Divine Rose palette looks like this. Here it is. I like this palette a lot. I am a neutral basic person. It's my bread and butter. I like going back to it over and over again. I really like palettes that maybe have something a little bit extra special in their neutralness. And you know, I would repurchase this palette. I like it a lot. I really do. This shade here in Divine Rose is stunning. This Blitz Astral shade. It's like just ultra sparkly, ultra sparkly. It's not as rose themed as maybe I think she could have done. And there's other Pat McGrath palettes that I like better. Divine Rose 2, I think, is a better take on a rose colored palette, but this is still really stunning. And I really do enjoy having this in my collection. It's not something that I would want to get rid of. I like these more satin shades here. I like every single color in here. Last month, I think that I had Subliminal and Sublime, and I said yes to Sublime because I like the green, and I said no to Subliminal because it has that black in it. So yeah, every single shade in here I like, and I would repurchase it. Although I would only repurchase it when Pat McGrath's doing a 40% off sale. I would not pay a penny more than 40% off any of these Pat McGrath palettes. Now next we have another all shimmer palette. This is the Flower Beauty Desert Lights palette. I like this one a lot. It's my kind of tones. I know I'm contradicting myself saying with the Chanel all shimmer palette, I wouldn't repurchase it. But the thing is with this one is this is, you know, 80% less than that palette. This is $10, I think, for 6 really, really pretty shimmers, all tones that I really love. I would use all 6 of these. I used to have Jungle Lights, the original. I decluttered that one because I wouldn't use every single shade. This one I still really love, and I like having it in my collection. So I'm going to say yes, I would repurchase it, mainly because the formula is great and the price point's also really good. I mean, that does really play a factor in it. Maybe I don't use this as much because it's an all shimmer palette, but I can justify it a little bit more because I'm paying less money than a $50 Chanel quad. I don't remember how much Chanel quads go for anymore, but this I know is like $10. Now, the one I really don't want to talk about is the Ensley Rain Lands of Enchantment. Ensley Rain's been in a lot of drama as of recently. I really don't plan on showcasing them on my channel, promoting them on my channel. But I will be honest and say that this is my favorite Ensley Rain palette. You would look at that and not think that about me, but I had so much fun when I play with this palette. It really pushes me outside my comfort zone. Every single look that I do with this palette, I just love. To me, this is color for my style, and I think it's fantastic. I will say that I hate how big it is. I really, really dislike that. It's very large for me. Probably one of my biggest palettes other than the Glamlight Scooby-Doo palette. And a lot of the times I will declutter large palettes. Like I decluttered all of my Mega ColourPop palettes solely because of the size, not because I didn't like the color stories. So I do keep this around despite that. I just love how like you have these pastels, you have midtones, you have deep tones. You can do so much with this palette, and the shimmers are really pretty. You do have more of like a traditional indie shimmer, but you do have some of these textured shimmers. Not my favorite type of shimmer, just practicality wise, they're very messy and flaky, but these stick a lot better than I found in some of other Ensley Rains palettes, like Cold Moon. That palette, while I love the color story, I don't reach for it as much because it's so messy. And this one's a lot less messy. So that's why this one's my favorite. I probably would repurchase this, just being honest, if it was to disappear from my collection. I really love this palette. We're just gonna take off the name and keep the rest of it. Moving right along, the Odens Eye Spring Dragon palette. This was in collaboration with Judy. This is kind of like on my unofficial back of my mind chopping block. Not because of the color story, the formula is just not there. This was my last purchase with Odens Eye, and I just found all three of these palettes to be not great. I decluttered the Earthwood and the Mighty Monster. I am deciding I'm going to no pan left behind that palette before I make the final decision. And I'm also going to no pan left behind this palette before I make the final decision. Really, the only thing that saves this palette for me is the inclusion of this kind of just neutral brown to make this pastel palette a little bit more wearable, at least for me. I love that you don't have to go super, super pastel with this palette, and you can kind of control the depth. But, you know, it's just the formula's not super good. So I'm leaning towards probably decluttering this, but I do want to try it one more time before deciding that. And since it's on my unofficial chopping block, like, no, I would not repurchase this palette. That's an easy pass for me. Now, next up is Natasha Denona, my mini dream palette. It has this little sticker here because I did do no pan left behind. I'm doing a series on my channel where I'm trying to touch every single palette in my eyeshadow collection this year, which is going to be a struggle. This one I already completed, and this is my favorite Natasha Denona mini palette. I love the tones. This is my perfect neutral color story without being like neutral. It's not too cool tone. It's not too warm tone. It has the right amount of pinkiness for me. I just love this so much. I could probably get rid of most of my minis and not think twice about it, but this one I would always repurchase. So this is going in the yes pile. And then we have our next Unearthly palette. This is the Dreamer palette. They came out with this as like their cool tone version for holiday. Is it like 2 years? I hope it's not 2 years ago now. That would make me sad. But here's what this palette looks like. I've already said that I love Unearthly's formula so much. With that in mind, I don't think that this is a palette I have to have in my collection. I do love having it, but I love the other Unearthly palettes in my collection more. Like if I had to declutter one Unearthly palette, it would probably be this one. So would I repurchase this? I don't know. I really do like this clouded shade. It looks like a gray, but it has like this tiny hint of purple. It's like the perfect undertone for a gray where it doesn't just like blank out your eyes. I love these peaches here. It has a brown. Yeah, I would repurchase this palette. I really love Unearthly's formula. So if they were doing some kind of sale and if it disappeared, I don't think the same day go out and buy it. I would wait for a sale and then I would pick this up. That's what I would do. That's a category now, but I'm going to put it in the yes regardless. And then my very last palette to talk about is the Bella Beaute Bar Basic Witch palette. This is my only Bella Beaute palette, but I do really love it. so much. I would love to pick up more Bella Beaute Bar palettes, but they are quite pricey. And living in Europe, it's a little bit harder to get my hands on it, and it only raises the cost more. So that's the only reason why I haven't. Also, like, they do come out with quite a few colorful palettes, so I need to be very mindful when picking out the palettes that they'll fit me and I'm not buying it just because of the brand. I love this palette so much. I would definitely repurchase it. I love the purples. I love the greens. It's just so pretty. I love the names. Resting Witch Face is so stunning. It's so stunning. I love it so much. Bella Beaute Bar just has a really beautiful formula. I do have an affiliate code with them. I'll link it on the screen here and down below. It'll save you some money if you decide to purchase from them. I get a small kickback. It is what it is. Use my code, use a different code, save some money. But yeah, I would repurchase this palette. It is my kind of colorful palette as well. Not too dark, not too light. Just that perfect Goldilocks purple palette with a little bit of something else. So this is going in the yes. And that means, in summary, I think this is my best outcome yet. I have 8 palettes that I would repurchase and 2 that I would not. It's usually a 50-50 split. I am very surprised. So recapping, we have Bella Beaute Bar Basic Witch. Then we have Unearthly Dreamer. I'm going to put this in like the less excited. Natasha Denona, I Need My Mini Dream palette. The Lands of Enchantment palette. We have Flower Beauty Desert Lights, Pat McGrath Divine Rose, Unearthly Spring Magic, and then Lethal Cosmetics Midnight Serenade. So 7 of these I would immediately go out and repurchase. 1 I would wait for a sale. Sorry, 2 I would go out. 2 I would wait for a sale because I would not buy this full price. So 2 I would wait for a sale, and then that leaves 6 that I would immediately go out and purchase. And then the 2 that I would not repurchase are my Chanel Mediterranean Quad and the Odens Eye Spring Dragon palette. That's a really good episode for me because, like I said, they're mostly 50-50, which means like 5 palettes or so I would not repurchase. And to me, that means maybe they should not be in my collection. But having 8 of them be yeses means that maybe I'm making some improvements. But this is everything that I have for you today. I would love to hear down below if you like some of the palettes that I dislike, or if you dislike some of the palettes that I do like. Give me all your thoughts and opinions on these palettes down below. This is where I'm going to leave you all, though. I hope you're having a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.